But if we're not conscious, if we're not aware of what is driving us, then it makes sense why we're going to be frustrated and continuing to repeat the cycle, try harder, get burned out, all the things, and lose relationships along the way. Because at the end of the day, if we're not aware of what our value system is, or our motive to do something, or reasoning, or why, then we're not going to have a chance. We're going to keep trying. But it makes sense why some of the most popular celebrities, athletes, even executives and entrepreneurs will say, surrounded by all these people, they never felt lonelier. And that's the paradox, because they bring all these people in, and they're, there's one of my favorite artists has a line in this song that says he never feels alone as much as when he's on stage in front of thousands of people.
Your business's success depends on relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Karl Ponto. Each week I'll bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week I'm excited to connect with Josh Perry. Josh is a high-performance coach dedicated to helping people break free from mental constraints to take their performance and vision to the next level. As a former X Games athlete who overcame multiple brain tumors, Josh brings a compassionate yet direct approach to helping people evolve beyond traditional performance strategies into deeper knowing, alignment, and embodied execution in their lives. Congrats on overcoming multiple brain tumors, and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
Thanks, Karl. I appreciate it. And I know we've been chatting for a minute, and so excited to be able to dive in a little bit more. And I appreciate your human-to-human perspective. I think that's something that's very meaningful to me, and could be the gap that could fill the gap that could be filled that will solve a lot of issues in the world that we see it.
Yeah, I definitely agree that a lot of what companies are missing is that human-to-human connection. And I'm really excited to talk with you about one of the things that I think causes that lack of connection, which is people feeling like they're trying to have to do all these different things, trying to do too much, and not really getting a chance to connect with themselves or other people. So I'd love to hear more about your approach to simplifying what people consider high performance by doing less. And how do you help people do that? And what do you see to be the keys for success in being more connected by doing fewer things?
So the way I define high performance is about the level of self-awareness you have, because you can only perform at the level in which you know yourself. And I know this to be true from my time as a professional athlete, and then the people I work with that are high performers from the outside, and they generate great results. And on the inside, they're fueled by pressure, stress, and fear. A lot of it they're unaware of. And so I refer to it as the negation of self. They identify with the negation of self. So being afraid of the I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, I'm not acceptable, I'm not fill in the blank. And that informs their pursuit. And so there's a lot of effort. There's a lot of forceful effort. There's a lot of doing more. And if we're identifying with the negation of self, the pursuit reinforces that negation. So if someone believes that they're not enough, that informs their pursuit to develop and acquire the skills and knowledge, experience, and all the tools to be enough. It only reinforces that they're not enough, so it can never be enough to obtain. And so my question is, why do you do what you do? Why are your goals your goals? Why are they important to you? Why are you complaining about the same things? Why are you X, Y, or Z? Just why? Because when we can peel back the layers and understand what's driving us, then we can take a different approach. And maybe the thing that we behave towards or that we participate in, maybe it doesn't change, but the energy signature does. And rather than forcing our way through life, we can find an ease and a flow. And so what I know from my experience personally, and then working with the clients I work with that are, the CEO founders, executives, competitive athletes, solopreneurs, and everyone in between, there's this tendency to label our discomfort as a problem and then go out and try to solve that problem. And we apply more energy, more force. The typical high performance world says you're just not disciplined enough. You need more discipline. You need more effort. You got to be better. All these things. And lo and behold, it's just reinforcing something that's there that creates that separation. So I know a lot of your work is about that human connection, and I find most of us aren't even connected to ourselves, let alone connected to other people and the things that we want. Anytime we're separate, the human being as an organism feels isolated, feels separate too. We're going to be in a state of survival. And that's where all the things start to go dysfunctional and become exhausting. There's a huge expense of energy, and then that bleeds into relationships, spirituality, health, so on, so business, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I really am resonating with what you're sharing here, because there is that idea of whatever you focus on, you get more of. So if you're always focusing on the things you lack, or that sense of not being good enough, and then you look for solutions to that perceived problem, but this keeps reinforcing itself, because you're that you just keep focusing on that gap and not on connecting with the positive parts of yourself, or the things that are your strengths. You're always just looking at where you're not good enough. And it like you said, that having that how that reinforces the sense of disconnection and all the energy that takes, and how that ripples into poor relationships, which lead to more isolation, and it's this kind of vicious cycle. And so I think, yeah, the way to break out of that, man, you mentioned that the flow state, and kind of getting that self-awareness and overcoming that vicious cycle, is really by simplifying things down to, and really understanding where you're coming from and what your real values are, and who you are as a person when it comes to what your real strengths are, and what your values are. Because then it's a whole different mindset and a different focus. And that, while it seems like can be a kind of fluffy, or like not a real influence on success or experience, but it really can influence all the different levels of behavior and actions you take beyond that, and lead to some really massive changes in experience and quality of life and success, because you're starting by focusing on what's really in alignment with who you are. And once you know who you are, you're able to connect with people on a much deeper level, or at all, because you'll find what we have in common, and it makes just everything else you're trying to do with life and business and work possible in ways that it wasn't before, when you're focusing on just the gaps in yourself.
Yeah, we know what we focus on expands, and this is largely at the unconscious level. And it starts with the stories we're told growing up, and the stories we hear, the stories we see, and the stories we start to tell ourselves. And the brain is a cognitive miser. It uses so much energy in relation to its size comparable to the body. And it sees energy use as a threat. And so it loves shortcuts. So it takes those stories, and the brain's always trying to find evidence to prove those stories true. So we're right. The ego loves to be right, even fighting for its limitations, because being wrong is considered a threat. So it being a cognitive miser, it creates these shortcuts, which become beliefs. Because when we're in a situation, we're not going to stop and then run through all these stories that we've ever told or thought or heard. We're just, going to run a belief, which filters what we see and determines what we see in the world. And you mentioned this thing about shared values, is how I interpret it. Like, we connect with people over things we have in common. The relationships are governed by values, and the depths of that relationship is governed by the depths of our values and our exchange of values. So our ability to demonstrate the things we say we value, and we connect over that. And I find so many people, myself included, as a human being, in doing this work and continuing to grow, it's about how aware can I be, because it all is defined by consciousness. So our level of consciousness is going to drive our level of our psychology and our awareness, and our psychology is going to govern our performance, and all the connections and relationships, all part of that. But if we're not aware, conscious, if we're not aware of what is driving us, then it makes sense why we're going to be frustrated and continuing to repeat the cycle, try harder, get burned out, all the things, and lose relationships along the way. Because at the end of the day, if we're not aware of what our value system is, or our motive to do something, or reasoning, or why, then we're not going to have a chance. We're going to keep trying. But it makes sense why some of the most popular celebrities, athletes, you know, and even executives and entrepreneurs will say, you know, surrounded by all these people, they never felt lonelier. And that's the paradox, because they bring all these people in, and they're, you know, I there's one of my favorite artists has a line in this song that says he never feels alone as much as when he's on stage in front of thousands of people. It's this separation from self.
Yeah, I've talked with other people about the how lonely it is for, especially like executives, are kind of higher up the hierarchy you go in a business, the lonelier it gets, because there's fewer and fewer people on that on those levels that you can connect with or could understand what the experience is like. And it's also even from when you're starting a new business as an entrepreneur, usually there's a driving reason why people want to start a company, because they want to make a difference. There's this like vision they have for the business, but that has to come from themselves, knowing what who they are and why they want to start this company, beyond financials, or because there's like the bunch of other kind of superficial external reasons, but they don't have that internal sense of self, that internal why answer, that internal vision. The company starts as an extension of themselves. If they don't have that foundation to build on top of, then it's going to be harder for the business to succeed, because the company's brand and there's all the things that they'll need to differentiate themselves and attract the people that will be the first clients or the investors, all that sort of stuff, are going to be attracted by the people that are starting it, not the business yet, because it's really not a business until there's the closed business and bring in revenue and stuff. So it's really about the people that start it. But if you don't really know who you are when you're founding it, there's like a huge disconnect there. And so it's interesting how that early on in a company's life cycle, the leaders need to have this connection and this to themselves. And then even if the business is successful and the company is really big, leaders need to have this connection, because there's still that loneliness at the top. And there's a lot of people that feel like they said, like the success on paper, but internally they're like, is this it? Why does everything feel so empty still? Even though from the outside looking in, it looks like it should be perfect. And it really comes down to that lack of connection with themselves and lack of connection with other people, and that they've kind of haven't been building the human to human side of things as much as they need to really be fulfilled on a more holistic level. And it is a huge underlying problem for a lot of otherwise very successful people.
Yeah, I think I always recall Jim Carrey's 2015-16 commencement speech. I forget what year it was, but one of the ones that went viral. And he said something about, you know, sharing his journey and about how his father inspired his journey, because he saw his father get fired from something he hated. He's like, oh, you can fail at something you don't like. I might as well take a chance at something I love. And then he said something about, like, I wish everyone could achieve success, financial wealth, like whatever, all their dreams, just to realize it's not going to be the thing that fixes you. It's not going to be the thing that fills the void. And I wonder, how many people do we see that start a business or pursue athletics or whatever the goal is, with the idea, the subconscious idea, that that's going to be the thing that makes them feel better. And then they get to the top and they're like, why isn't it working? Is this it? And then they continue going and going until they get burnt out, or have this, you know, rock bottom moment where they go, oh, maybe I should consider, why am I doing this? Why do I really care about this? Because if someone's defined, and they built a business defined on trying to validate themselves or get the acceptance they never got, or whatever it is, and they're not aware of it, of course, people aren't going to be connected to it as much as they are. But when there's a shared vision, a shared value around why the business exists, it's easier to rally at people, because all you do is share that mission, that vision, and find people that believe what you believe. I think that's what Simon Sinek talks about, is, you know, when people believe what you believe, they'll want to support it. But how many people are aware of that, which is what my purpose is. It's an extension of me personally, but it's been my life journey. If I've experienced these things, to then realize, oh, my purpose is larger than me. So my business is a personal extension of me, but my purpose is to shift the global landscape of leadership, because it starts with self, is what I believe. And as I've seen that play out in my life, I see so many other people and relationships start to evolve, and the impact I'm having is larger. Now, what would it look like if even 1% of entrepreneurs operated off of that paradigm? That'd be a massive shift in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems like there's more of a momentum towards people wanting to have more that sense of fulfillment and realizing that there's this gap. And so when you're working with people, what's often like the first step or first things people can do to start making progress towards being better connected with themselves? What do you recommend people do as those first few steps?
Is really just identifying where they're not connected with themselves. And that goes, I have a couple different auditing processes. One of them is on my website. It's free. It's my performance audit. And just by going through that, the questions that it's asking, you'll start to create connections. You'll start to see based on the input you give it and what the question is, like, oh, maybe I'm not doing this the way I want to. And you'll make all those connections. But when I'm working with someone one-on-one, or when I'm talking or whatever, my objective is just to get someone to raise their level of consciousness, their awareness. And by asking simple questions of like, where are you chronically complaining about something? Where do you feel stuck? Where do you feel limited? All right, first step is, what story do you have attached to that? What is the narrative in your mind? How are you describing? How are you talking about the world? Is it about what's happening, what's always happened, or is it about what you want to happen? That's the first thing, because then we can go from there. It's like, okay, what meaning are you attaching to that story? I see this with sales teams. It's like, the story is the economy is tough right now. All right, I'm sure we could find evidence of that being true and false. What meaning are you attaching to that story? Oh, it's really hard to sell right now. That's a common story and belief that I hear in the sales world. So, all right, cool. How is that story and the meaning attached to it? How does that make you feel? It feels like I'm never going to be able to do enough. It feels like I'm always behind. There's always more to do, or I'm not going to hit quota, or whatever it is. All right, how does that drive your behavior? I'm just working more. I'm doing more. I'm sleeping less. I'm feeling worse. It's like, can you see the cyclical behavior there? My question in that regard, that example is, what's a different story that you could tell yourself? And where can you find evidence of that? And by virtue of that, what belief can you shift? And what value can you see from that belief shift? And then that will determine how you behave differently. If people can just start asking those questions about the story, the meaning, and how that drives their behavior, and start changing that, start playing with that, reality becomes very different.
Yeah, and I think overall, it's a transformation from a victim mindset to someone who's in charge of their own story, the hero of the story. Because for the victim, there's no chance for growth, and everything happens to them, and they don't really have any agency in the outcome of the story. And no one likes to be, when someone else makes them a victim, but they'll often put themselves in that role because there's no responsibility and there's no ownership of the situation. But it also means you're going to be stuck where you are, because there's no character arc, there's no growth for a victim. Whereas if you frame yourself as the hero of the story, and you have a way you can influence things, and you take some responsibility for what you can control, and you admit that you change that mindset and start asking questions about how you can change things, then it gets you on a path to, you're still not necessarily going to succeed right away, but you're going to keep iterating and trying and adapting and learning and moving forward. And that's a very different mindset, a very different approach that is much more likely to succeed, because your whole view of the events are different than if you stuck in a victim mindset.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way to put it. Is there's victim mindset, and then there's an empowered mindset. There's fixed mindset, there's growth mindset. And Carol Dweck's work around fixed versus growth mindset is very empowering to me. because it tells us that we're not fixed. Like we're not like our skills, our knowledge, our talents, they can improve with effort. And I say this with love and compassion. Like it's not about right or wrong, good or bad. Like there's no judgment for me. There's reality. There's choices and implication and consequences. It's up to you to decide if those are what you want to experience in your life. And I know that it's no matter how, and I've been in, no matter how difficult it is, and I've been in very difficult, painful, psychological, emotional moments in my life where I felt literally like giving up, or I didn't want to continue moving forward, didn't want to continue doing the thing, whatever it was. I understand from a vast amount of experiences the pain that comes with this and the difficulty attached to it. And I know it's possible. And so when someone is saying, they're making excuses or whatever, yeah, all right, cool. Also, let's consider, why is that so? Because we know the ego it loves fighting for its limitations. It loves fighting to be right, even if it's in suffering, because it's familiar pain. The unfamiliar pain of trying, as you mentioned, there's a responsibility there. And just that level of acceptance of like, oh, I have to do something about this, it changes everything. And a lot of human beings are not equipped with the tools and the knowledge and the skills to be able to handle that and frame it, which is a big role of why I do what I do, is to help people see what's possible. Because if you don't know that these different programs are running, you're going to go to information overload, which is overwhelm. You're going to get stressed. Cortisol and adrenaline are going to, increase and be released through your body. You're not going to think well, and you're going to resort back to default safety, survival. So doing something differently is going to be a threat. Staying where you are, even if it's miserable, it's known, it's familiar, it's predictable. That's safe. I would argue it's not in the long run, but in the immediate, it is.
100% agree. I think it's important for people to understand that that's what's going on in the brain, so they can start making the difference, doing different behaviors to fix that way of thinking. But definitely worth getting help on those things, because it's not an easy transition to make. But thank you so much for connecting with me today, Josh. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection podcast, please leave a review, and subscribe. If you want to learn more about myself or Josh, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.